This is Hard Parking, sponsored by Right Honda and Right Toyota out of Scottsdale, Arizona. I'm your host, Jhae Pfenning, recording from my home studio in Gilbert, Arizona. Wow, it's been a wild week. Recording this on a Saturday. Everyone around me seems to have contracted the norovirus. It's basically a stomach bug, vomiting, diarrhea. I think I'm next. My stomach does hurt. You know that little layer of muscle that you have, that secret spot right around your diaphragm? That's what it feels like if someone kind of jabbed me in my diaphragm area. I think that's what it's called. If not, it sounds ridiculously stupid. But my wife had it. My mother-in-law had it. They're recovering right now. Took care of them yesterday. Daughter had it. Zeke had it. Nova had it. Naya had it. So I think this is my last healthy day this weekend. Coming up on today's show, going to touch on some current events. A lot of stuff to talk about. All the crazy controversy, the plane crashes, what's going on with that. Just a little bit in Dank DeMoss in the car section and an update on my Infiniti. So I've been wondering, what the hell happened to Luigi Mangione? The guy who is charged with killing Brian Thompson of United Healthcare. But he's in the news. He found himself in the news. There's a story here on NBC New York. A Massachusetts woman who told the police she went to the U.S. Capitol to kill members of President Donald Trump's cabinet. She was influenced by Luigi Mangione, the man charged with fatally shooting the CEO of United Healthcare, prosecutor said in a court filing. Ryan Michael English, who goes by Riley English, was arrested Monday and remained in custody after her initial court appearance on Thursday. English didn't immediately challenge her pretrial detention, court records show. English, 24, so she's 24. Got all these angry 20-year-old women running around trying to kill people, I guess. From Deerfield, Massachusetts, told police she felt like she was on a mission and had been thinking about this for a while because of Luigi. Mangione pleaded not guilty in December, and we haven't heard from him since. So this is a very wild story. I think America expected Luigi to plead guilty, and all that momentum of everyone saying, yeah, let's take out all the CEOs and take out everybody in charge died quickly. I don't know if that's the right choice of words. It went down quickly, right? Because everyone's thinking he did it. He did it as a statement, and this is going to start change. He's proud that he did it, and he wants to be the martyr for doing it. Except for he pled not guilty. So again, like I said before, I don't know if he did it or not. I don't think it was really him, but we still don't have enough information to go off of. Wow. So January ended on a crazy note. We had the Black Hawk helicopter collide with the small American Airlines flight outside of Reagan Airport over the Potomac River. That's a bit of controversy. Conspiracies flying all over the place. At the end of the day, I look at it as 3 people in the Black Hawk died. I think it was 64 people. Flight crew and passengers died in the American Airlines flight. And if the impact didn't kill them, I think they were several hundred feet up in the air. They died with the water. So either as soon as they hit the water, they were done from the impact of landing on the water, or once that temperature of the water got to you, they said that part of the river is 400 or 500 feet wide, at least. And the water temperature was 35, 37 degrees. One thing about that, though, is, the big buzz right now, the big phrase is the whole DEI thing. You have to remember that the E doesn't stand for equality, it sounds for equity, which means everybody gets to the same place, whether qualified or not. It's kind of like in school, where they have the No Child Left Behind. And if you have a child that's super smart, you want them to get the best education possible. But in the No Child Left Behind, they slow down the curriculum so that the slowest kid, the kid in class that's the furthest behind, can catch up and be equal to the rest of the kids. But I think that, everything is not DEI. I mean, it's become kind of one of those cringy things. And because of that, they refused to release the name of the pilot until recently. And the pilot was a woman. She was a former Biden aide, which I don't think that has anything to do with it. But man, let the conspiracy theories fly. I think I read on a post, and I haven't confirmed this, that this wasn't even a full-time job. So the mission the mission, because I don't know if you guys heard about, I don't know what sort of information you get when you're not sitting on X and listening to X Spaces and listening to all these people call in and give their opinions on things. But they were practicing continuity of government drills, which they do all the time over there. The continuity drills is, and we do it at the hospital, is if the hospital goes down, you lose power, mass casualty, whatever, it's a set of plans that you have to practice over and over and over so that the business can continue. And so they were running the drills that if we had another September 11th or maybe a nuclear attack, this was one of those drills to teleport a very high priority person from point A to point B. The doomsday plane, a lot of people were talking about the doomsday plane, was dispatched as well. So I'd imagine the conspiracy theories because the doomsday plane was there. Like, why is the doomsday plane out there in DC? What's going on? What aren't they telling us? Well, apparently that was all part of the continuity of government planning. So there's a lot of questions still. I think it has less to do with the pilot. They're not telling us everything anyway, but I just think it's unfortunate that anytime something happens now, people will automatically raise the DEI flag. And like I said last week, it's kind of my version of affirmative action. That's not really the case, but it needs to be the best person for the job. And I don't know if this person was the best person for that job. And even if they were, why were they flying this continuity exercise? It's a very serious exercise. And you would think you would have to be the top, only the best of the best, the top gun, essentially, of helicopter pilots to even be asked to serve on those type of missions. The air ambulance in Northeast Philly, it was an air ambulance from Mexico. Looked it up online. 6 people on board. Thing went down like a missile. A lot of people thought it was a missile. They thought we were under attack. Conspiracy theories, again, having occurred less than 48 hours after the incident in DC. But it was confirmed that it was an air ambulance, 6 people, 2 pilots, 2 physicians, a family member, and the actual patient. I don't know if you saw it online, the impact, that crater. It's a huge crater. And I don't look at a lot of crash sites, but the explosion that you could see everywhere on social media, man, that's straight off of TV. It's like, what were they hauling on that little plane? I guess maybe pure oxygen. A lot of medical things are highly flammable. So whatever was going on that plane, there's so many theories. Did the pilots lose consciousness? You know, they crashed from 1,500 feet and they weren't very far from where they took off. So thoughts and prayers to everybody involved. And like I said, in both cases, there's more questions than answers. Let's get into some car news. I figured out what was wrong with my Infiniti. I went out there and started looking because last week I said that I got it all put together, spent a lot of time doing it. And yes, it was the transmission fluid. There's a 17 millimeter, like little nipple that comes off the radiator, and that upper nipple came loose. And maybe that's what I get for buying a $80 replacement radiator instead of an OEM one. But once I figured that out, I looked around, the thing was covered with kind of the greasy, well, actually the fluid. And I was able to wiggle the bolt or the nut, the cap that goes around it. And I go, oh, bet you anything, this is it. So I took the wrench, tightened it up, wiped it off, started the car, never had an issue again. So the vehicle is back. The Infiniti is back, and I've ran a few errands with it. And honestly, it feels good having my FX50S back. You know, I could drive Yvette's MDX, which I did a few times, or reluctantly have to take my NSX to go shopping or to actually run errands. I'll never take the Honda Z out of the garage. Not because there's an issue, it's just usually the MDX is parked right behind it. And with the NSX, it's just a straight shot. But now none of that matters. So let's get to this story with Dank DeMoss. Everybody's seen this by now, I would think, but maybe you want my opinion on it because I have one. Dank DeMoss, also known as Big Dank, is suing Lyft. You've all seen the video. She shows up to get in the car and the driver does not want her to get in the car. She is a 490-pound hip hop artist. She's getting beat up everywhere on social media because of her weight. But she knows what this is. I'm going to try not to shame her in that aspect because she's morbidly obese. And we know a lot of people in our lives that are obese. But when I was taking statistics, there's this little thing in statistics, and it's called outlier. And people like her, and what's that? There's another rapper, some other guy who was just in the hospital, and he's even larger than she is. And yeah, the thought is be who you are and nobody else. But when you're incredibly unhealthy, like I don't know what she's tried to do in the past to take care of that issue. Not everybody can do that. It's hard. It's a hard thing. But you know the situation, right? And I would say of people who are morbidly obese, think about anorexic people. And I know that's the opposite of this, but how often do you really see people that are clinically anorexic? Not very often, but it's the same deal. You see someone who's clinically anorexic, people are going to make fun of them. And there's certain things they probably can't do that other people can do because of their weight. So they make concessions. When you look at Big Dank, I don't know if I want to call her Dank DeMoss or Big Dank. Here's some photos of her wedged between the steering wheel, I'd assume in her car. One thing I noticed about every photo of her in a vehicle, it's always a large vehicle. It's always an SUV or some sort of a larger crossover. Here's one of her sitting in the back of a hatch, a lift gate, basically filling up the entire lift gate, like some cargo. So she knows what this is. And the driver, I guess, told her to call Uber XL, which is the very first thing I was thinking because I'm not a very nice person. I would never tell her that. But let's listen along at their exchange, and I'll tell you exactly where I think the driver messed up.
Have you been in cars that size before?
Yes, I have. I've been in cars smarter than that. As I'm walking, I see him like making faces or whatever. I'm like, oh man.
She already knew.
I can fit in this car.
Look, believe me, you can.
Yes, I can.
Believe me.
He told her there's not enough room in his car.
The kicker part was when he started to talk about his tires. I feel like that was a slap in the face. That was like my tires, like.
The driver said his tires could not handle her weight.
Every big person you turn down because they can't fit in your car?
Yeah, because they need to order.
She's not big. She's morbidly obese.
You know what? I don't never have to order Uber XL.
He apologized, canceled the ride, and left her there. The rapper says she's pretty tough.
No. Okay. So let's examine what we just heard. So here's where the driver messed up. How many times have you ordered an Uber or a Lyft and they canceled on you? When I was in New Orleans, first time we were in New Orleans, we were right on one of the busiest streets during one of the busiest times of the year. And we kept ordering an Uber and they kept canceling on us. We had 4 Ubers cancel on us. They canceled on us because they saw where the pickup location was. And they said they don't want to get caught in that traffic. So they just kept canceling, which makes you really upset as a driver. You just have to keep ordering. I think where this guy messed up is when he came around that corner and he saw her from a block or two away, because let's face it, there's no way he didn't see her from a block away. She's not big. She's really big. She's easy to spot. You should have just canceled on her and just kept driving. You should have canceled on her and turned, and it would have probably notified her your driver is canceled. Secondarily, why didn't she just order a bigger one? I mean, I don't know. I don't use Lyft. I use Uber. And if I want a nicer ride, I'll order Uber Black. Sometimes it's nice. Sometimes it's just a Mercedes that they just got from the junkyard. Every single dash light on. And if I know we have a lot of people, I order an Uber XL. Again, every photo of her getting in and out of vehicles, she's in a larger vehicle. All right, let's see what her attorneys had to say. This guy's greasy, man. His hair all greased back.
I knew that it was wrong.
Her attorneys, John Marco and Zach Runyon, say weight is a protected characteristic in Michigan by law.
It would be no different than a driver pulling up and saying, I don't want to have black people in my car, or I don't want to have Christians in my car, or Muslims in my car. It's the same.
It's not
under
the same.
The law, it's the same.
But he was very careful there by saying under the law, it's the same. And because it's the law in Michigan, I guess I could see their complaint, and they're going to settle with Lyft out of court. I think a driver, whether you're doing Lyft or Uber, can decline a ride for any reason. Obviously, I told you why I was getting declined. When they work late at night, picking people up from the bar, they're going to decline half those rides, especially if they show up and they see a whole bunch of belligerent people. They're probably going to just cancel the ride. So this guy messed up by telling her that she's going to blow the tires out. His suspension can't, keep up with it. He should have just canceled the ride. So now she has a case. And everyone, of course, is making fun of her. I don't know. Am I making fun of her? Maybe I am, maybe I'm not. I don't think so, but I'm just saying the quiet thing out loud. She is an outlier. And at the end of the day, is this a wake-up call for her or something else? The gold is always in the comments, too. One person says it's Lyft, not forklift. Wow. And now for a lighter story. See what I did there? I didn't really get an opportunity to talk about Barrett Jackson for me personally, because on the last episode, I talked with Chris Ashworth about it. But there was a few cars there that I wanted to kind of talk about how much they hammered for, which if you don't know what that means, it's just when they're like, sold, right? That's the hammered. Not everybody knows that when you're listening to this. So for those of you who do know that, give me a break. And then before I do that, I want to talk about why it is I love going to Barrett Jackson. And it's not necessarily the cars as much as you think it would be, because we're spoiled here in Scottsdale. We get all the cool cars. We have all the cool events. Highline Auto Cars and Coffee, Queen Creek Cars and Coffee. There's so many of them. We have Fountain Hills coming up. The concourse on Fountain Hills. Like, we get to see a lot of things that a lot of other cities don't get to see. And it doesn't have to be a special event. You just have to go to the right Cars and Coffee or right local event, and you're going to see your Paganis. You don't see Koenigseggs as much or Paganis that much, but they still show up at these events. If you go to Highline Auto Cars and Coffee, then on any given Saturday, they're going to have a hypercar or two show up. And it's a big deal. But what Barrett Jackson is for me is, I like, obviously, walk around and seeing all the cool cars. But it's an opportunity to see my friends. I get a lot of friends that come in from out of town, people that I may have met through other people. Well, let's talk about Jhae D'Amelio. The reason why this podcast is sponsored by Right Honda and Right Toyota. If it wasn't for Jane, I wouldn't have met Daryl and his son Weston. Okay, so who's Daryl and who's Weston? Every year at Barrett Jackson, Daryl usually hooks me up with passes. Bitter guest passes. Daryl has spent over $1 million at Barrett Jackson, and he's on a certain tier. He's, I think, a platinum VIP or something. And so he'd always hook me up. But how did I meet him? I met him through the Cody Walker 2019 auction with the yellow Civic Type R. If you've been watching this or listening to this long enough, you've heard Cody on my podcast. You've seen the videos that I used to post on social media of us going over to Barrett Jackson, myself, Jane, and their former CIO, Nick, and filming a video for the auction. So I wouldn't have known Cody Walker if it wasn't for Jane and Daryl, because the Type R that Daryl bought for his son Weston was the Cody Walker Reach Out Worldwide charity. So it all connects, right? There's another guy named Jason Day, and I talk about him pretty much every year. And he is pretty much the first employee for CarMax. Everybody knows CarMax. And we've been trying to get him on the podcast. He doesn't really want to come on, but we've talked about it. And I think I may have made some headway with him this year. But I would have met, obviously, Jason Day without Daryl, because he's Daryl's really good friend. So when I go to Barrett Jackson, I'm hanging out with Daryl and his son Weston. I love hanging out with those guys, but it's also, hey, if you're going to hook me up with a pass, guess who I'm attached to all day, or at least a lot of the day. I don't want to just show up and say, hey, thanks for the passes, I'm out. The passes you can get drinks on them, you know what I mean? And he also gets a golf cart, kind of drives us around. So when I have two passes that he's hooked me up with or let me borrow for a few days, they're not necessarily my passes to borrow out. So sometimes I lend them to family and close friends, but I'm like, hey, man, these aren't really mine. I kind of need them back because I need to give them back to Daryl so that he can give them to somebody else. Well, the last time before this one, so January of 24, he just hooked me up with two of them. I didn't have to pass them around, which is kind of why the reason why I registered to bid this time in January is because it's $500 to register to bid. You have up to 8 drinks per pass. So if you have your bitter pass and your bitter guest pass, I mean, technically it's like 16 drinks a day. So 16 drinks a day times, if you go to Barrett Jackson every day, I mean, that's a lot for $500, right? And I don't drink 16 drinks a day. I've never hit my cap on drinks, usually because I'm only there for a little bit. And there's only so much you can drink, and they don't really have good liquor, and somebody else is always buying you a drink. But it's the relationships is what I'm getting to. Whether I'm walking around with Josh or Byron or my friend Peter Cunningham when he comes into town, and Colin Comer, and you may not know who he is. Look him up, Colin Comer. Look up Colin Comer and Cars. I wouldn't have known Colin if it wasn't for Peter. Years ago, right after I moved here, I went to have breakfast with Peter, and Colin was supposed to show up and he was sick. And so that morning, it was just myself and Peter. And we went to go pick up all the passes from Colin's wife. And we went to all the different auctions, Peter and I. We went to all the different auctions and we bid on a car for Colin. So Colin had my phone number and Peter was doing the bidding and Colin was texting me what he wants to bid next. So we bought him like a Survivor Jeep. Kind of cool, right? Now, if you guys know who Adams Polishes is, every time Peter and Colin come into town, they stay at Adams' house of Adams Polishes. So small world. Some of my really good friends work for Adams during Barrett Jackson week. So it's all about relationships. So whoever's coming in town, whether it's Amy and Johnny Valencia or Peter or anybody else, it's always like, hey, who's going to Barrett? And it's even people here locally too. Hey, are you going to Barrett tomorrow? Yeah, let's go together. Or I'll meet you up there. Where you at? Where you at? You walk around, get some food, get some drinks, and go your separate ways. And that's why when Chris Ashworth hit me up and said, hey, I'm coming into town, I was like, oh, what day will you be available? And that day I took off of work because I wanted to take the opportunity, because I know that there's only so many days that you can go up to Barrett. And when you have so many different people that come into town and you want to spend some time with them, whether you see them at Barrett or have dinner afterwards or maybe meet up for breakfast, it's a lot more complicated on your schedule than you would think. Because I stay pretty busy around here. I don't know if you guys have noticed that or not. But last year, I went out to eat with my friend Michael, went to his house, stayed too late, got in trouble because I didn't call. And honestly, I wasn't gone that long, but my wife had a bug up her ass or something that day. But Jason Day and Daryl and the group had invited me out to dinner, and I said no. And I remember that this was on last year Friday, so 2024. And Jason said, what do you have going on? And I forgot what I said. And he said something that I would say stuck with me, but if I can't remember the exact quote, maybe it didn't. But it was basically like, if you have an opportunity to do something, do it. And ever since last year, and if you go back and listen to my Barrett Jackson episode, you're going to hear me say that next year, I'm going to take that opportunity. And so this year, I took that opportunity. And Daryl actually wasn't with us, Daryl Weston. It was just myself, Jason Day, and a couple others, right? Like really cool other people. The cool part about that was I've never hung out with any of these people. I mean, I've seen Jason Day at the auction and we've had drinks together, but we've never like sat down and had a drink or anything. If you've been to Barrett, you know what I mean. It's kind of in passing, and maybe you sit down with people while they're bidding on a car, but you really don't know him that well. I just know that he's really cool and really fun. And we went to Mastro's Ocean Club. And so it's just the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of us. Yeah, it's just the 5 of us. And we kind of felt each other out with questions, really cool questions. Who was the most famous person, like silly icebreaker questions, but they were really good. If you ever saved someone's life, who was the most famous person you met? What's a time in your life that you were just happier than any other time? Like, these were really good questions. And you can't get that, right? You don't get that when you're at Barrett Jackson. You don't get that when you're just dapping people up. You only get that in certain situations, right? So, who's the most famous person that you've met is a good question, because I could go to Jay Leno. I have photos with Jay Leno, but here's the thing. Jay Leno, if you catch him, he will take a photo with anyone until his handlers grab him and shuffle him along. So he's not going to remember that. And based on Jason Day's girlfriend's response, Jack, she had, I forgot who she had. I think it was Pete Rose. And they talked and just drank and had fun or something like that for like 30 or 45 minutes. Now that's an interaction, and that is invaluable. And that's kind of like, wow, that's cool. We had a guest on here before who was a pilot, Michael. I don't know if you guys remember that one. He's overdue for in studio, by the way. But he was telling me that, and I don't remember if he mentioned on the episode, but when he was sitting in the pilot's lounge, Shaq came in, and he and Shaq just talked for 30 or 40 minutes. He didn't take a photo with him. He wanted to act like he had been there before. I would have totally said, hey, man, take a selfie with me after the conversation. Oh, you know what? Maybe I would have. Maybe I wouldn't have, to be honest with you. But I think that my answer was actually Adam Carolla, because depending on who you've met and what circles are known in, right, that's a big part of it. But being able to see him at Monterey Car Week at the Acura event year after year after year. I think I've been to the event 5 or 6 times now, and he's always there year after year after year. He and Matt, the motivator, Deandra, who you guys know have been on the show, of CarCast show. Then after the third or fourth time, it's no longer, hey, Adam, hi, I'm a big fan. I'll listen to you. He's like, oh, hey, man, how you doing? I'm like, hey, what's up? And you can have small talk with him. And I cherish the small talk with people like that, because how many times, well, think about Joe Rogan, right? You guys are probably huge Joe Rogan fans. Imagine just being able to shoot the shit with him. No cameras, no nothing for 15, 20 minutes. You know, that's one of the deals when I had Ralph Geel on here of Stellantis. You know, I really was hoping that, and I met him last year, actually, during auction week at that house party. I was really hoping that I can get more unplugged information, but when his publicist joined the call before he did, I knew that he had to come from a slightly guarded place. And we still had a really great conversation, but, you know, it's not that sit down at Cars and Coffee, super casual conversation where you can really, I mean, a lot of times they're going to be careful still, right? But you can still get some good stuff out of them. Not trade secrets, but, you know, I really like to know who people are, right? That's the thing. And I think I got a little bit of that of Ralph Geo when I was able to have him on the podcast. But it's really about finding out who people really are. And I think they appreciate that. They don't get the same questions that everybody else gets. But let's move on to some of the cars at Barrett-Jackson before I close out this episode. There was a gated 360 Modena. See, we always say Modena, but I've also heard Modena. And I looked it up, and it's pronounced Modena. So it was a gated blue with tan interior or saddle interior, a gated Modena 360 in it. But it was gated. Everyone wants a gated one. If you don't know what that means, it's a stick shift, a standard, a manual transmission. Maybe it's the 430 that shot up. So my buddy Josh has a Mercedes-Benz 190, kind of an Evo heritage car. He's built it to look just like an Evo 1. And that was really cool to see. And I was with him when we went to the gala, and he was all over that car. And his car is, the one that he actually owns, is just as good, if not better, than the one that they sold at Barrett. The one they sold at Barrett went for $138,000. There was a all carbon Ford GT. All carbon cars are kind of cool. I would hate to have one. I'd be terrified. That thing would never get driven. No matter how many layers of Expel or protective film you put on it, something's going to get through, and it's going to ruin that beautiful carbon finish. That thing went for $1.6 million. There was a Pagani there. That was the one on all the media for Barrett-Jackson. The Pagani went for $1.75 million. The Batmobile. So this was, I think we talked about this last week. This auction was really movie car, show car, cartoon car, because they had the Mach 5 themed in. It was the old Batmobile, like the Adam West style Batmobile. Went for $450. They had a Batgirl motorcycle. They had a helicopter there. They had the old Joker car. And then there was a Ken Block truck. I don't think it was his actual truck. I think it was like somebody built it to be an exact replica. I think. I actually left that night. I think that went across on Friday or Saturday night, and that was, $990,000. That's what that thing went for. Another person that I failed to mention coming into town was Kyle Nielsen. He was here in studio at some point last year. And he's a guy of active sales, and I think he's moved on to other things. But he showed up, and we actually went out to eat. Myself, him, and Chris from Science of Speed on Saturday night before Kyle got up early in the morning on Sunday and took off. But it was kind of cool to be outside. Saturday was weird at Barrett-Jackson because I'm usually hanging out with Jason Day or Daryl, and we're sitting in their nice seats, usually on the second row, front and center. That's like everybody always sees me on TV because I always score those seats. But we were outside, and he showed up with James, which is a Stradman. So some of you may know who Stradman is. If not, look him up. It's spelled just like it sounds. Huge influencer, huge car influencer. But if you see him in front of you, he's not a look at me guy. And I've met him before at Monterey, and I was like, I'm pretty sure that's Stradman. And I don't even watch this stuff, right? He's got a very kind of in your face, glitchy presentation style. But when you're standing in front of him, he's just a dude. He's just a cool dude with a hat on. I think his wife, maybe, and kid were there. And then Lambo Jesus was with us and a few other people. Yeah, these are their Instagram names, Lambo Jesus, okay? Alex. But we're standing outside, and they have skybox passes. They have Barrett Jackson skybox passes. I have no idea how much those passes were for a day, but it had to be, I think you can't even buy them for the week. So I think in order to get the Barrett Jackson skybox, Barrett Jackson, the company, has to offer them to you. So like I said earlier, Daryl has spent over $1 million at Barrett Jackson. He's not in the skybox. Okay. Colin Comer, he's always in the skybox, always takes Peter up there. Matt DeAndrea, he's always in the skybox, probably because of his relationship with Adam. He doesn't even need a badge. He just goes up there. They know his face. How cool is that? And the thing is, he eats, but he doesn't really drink either. I've never seen Matt drink. I bet he drinks a little bit. Obviously, he has a beverage, the Bravago, but actually, we drank last year at the Stellantis party, but not a lot. Okay. He's kind of a sipper. I think he's always working the network. Anyway, James Stradman, they have these skybox passes, and I'm thinking, okay, well, I'm going to walk with you guys for a little bit until we get to the skybox. And even though I'm a bidder, there's levels to this stuff. As a registered bidder, I can't get to the skybox. I can't get to the muscle lounge. There's a couple places I can't get to. But James didn't want to go inside. And you know why? Because in the little entourage that we were with, there was probably 7 or 8 people, and they didn't have enough passes for everybody. So instead of going to the skybox and saying, all right, guys, peace, we'll be back. We're going to go up here. What are you guys going to do? He's like, no, we don't have enough passes for everyone. We're just going to stand out here and watch on the giant screen outside. And this is when the big stuff was crossing the block too. And I heard him say that, and I go, oh, that's really cool. I wouldn't have done that. I would have been like, peace. I'm going to the skybox. Peace. See you later. Where you want to meet later. But, man, that says a lot about somebody, right? I mean, does that make me a bad person because I just said that? I don't know, but I've always said that I'm not really big into Stradman's channel. Nothing personally against him. But at this point, I have nothing else but to say that he's a really cool guy. And he's Kyle Nielsen's, like one of Kyle's really good friends, one of his best friends. And Kyle is a great judge of character, and he's a great guy himself. So, relationships, right? It's all about relationships. Wow, that was a long car news. Hey guys, I want to thank you for checking out the show. This is actually the first show that I have recorded from start to finish on video. That's something I want to try to do more of for 2025. I know video is where it's at, although sometimes it's a lot harder than others. Because the way I do it, I don't do it all at once, although this time I literally did it all at once. I'm surprised I'm still talking because I think I'm coming down with that virus. And tomorrow, Sunday, we're going to see where we're at. So with that being said, it's time for the closing. I want to thank Right Honda and Right Toyota of Huntington Beach, Claremont Toyota, and Gardenia Honda, ArcusFoundry.com, AutoCannon officially licensed Honda and Acura gear. Can't forget the Patreon business supporters like Automotive Specialty Tool out of Owings Mills, Maryland, Kui Automotive out of Winter Garden, Florida, Pell Construction out of Caledonia, Michigan, Big House Small Home Design out of Ashford, Virginia, and Traverse City, Michigan, Shaping Success with Wes Tinkersley out of Boise, Idaho. Special shout out to Mark Stolman, Catherine Cox, Eddie Ramos, Richard Graves, Byron Jones, Bo Jung, Alice Kamina, Drew Bunkley, and Yasu Chiba. If you're interested in picking a Hard Parking Podcast shirt, email the show or send a message on any of the social media platforms. Follow me on Instagram at HardParkingPod or at Jhae Pfenning. And if you really enjoy this, consider sharing it with a friend, and I will talk to you all next week. Shut up!